It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we are talking about Among Thieves by M.J. Kuhn. Plot?
Well, there's a bunch of thieves.
True.
And Raya, you had the audiobook. How is her name pronounced?
Yes, I am 100% certain that it's Raya for reasons which I'll go into later, but it is Raya.
Okay. Raya is an assassin for a fantasy gang and stumbles on a plot to possibly steal the magical quill of the magical guildmaster who controls the brainwashed psychic people and sells them into slavery. And Raya, who has her own issues with the guildmaster, decides that she is going to get the gang she works for to steal the quill. But everybody who's on the heist mission has their own reason for wanting the quill. And also they're lesbians.
Yeah. Let's see what I would add. We are in fantasy Europe, pretty much.
Yeah.
We're
an extremely generic fantasy,
extremely generic fantasy Europe. Yes. Every member of this heist crew this is a heist book. Every member of the heist crew that is put together here has their own secrets, and we have Raya, the assassin with strange powers. We have Nash, the smuggler woman whose power is that she is tall and can steer a ship. We have Ivan, who is a master of disguise and is also freakishly handsome. And we have Tristan, who is good at three-card Monty and also
pickpocketing.
Pickpocketing.
And we have Evelyn, whose main main power seems to be that she's extremely uptight.
She likes to say bollocks and a lot because the accent of the native people from the country that this book in is British, even though there's another nation which is Brillish, which is a little bit confusing. And yes, she is a Cockney palace guard, even though she comes from a noble family.
That was a decision made by the voice actor who recorded the audiobook.
She swears a lot, but I mean, she came up through the palace guard training, so there is that. And the accent points that the book identifies as making her from this city whose name I've forgotten are all her Britishisms. And they're not high-class Britishisms either. Are there lesbians in this book? We've already said, yes, there are lesbians. Yes. Raya is gay.
And Evelyn appears to be
receptive,
returning
certainly.
Some of her interest. Receptive, yes.
Wizards, yeah. Definite wizard.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's got a tower and everything.
Oh, yeah, he does.
Yep. And they fight, obviously. Why should you read this book?
I don't know. It's moderately entertaining. It has lesbians.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. That's pretty much all that I can offer for this one. It's short-ish, It
moves along. There are worse ways to spend 3 to 5 hours.
Yeah, the action sequences are good. When things start kicking off, it moves along at a good clip, which is entertaining.
You're right. The action sequences, I would say, are above average.
Yes, he said.
And they are easy to follow.
Yes, he said, planting seeds for the future. Oh, foreshadowing? And when the talky bits drag, but if you're reading, you can just sort of skim through them because they cover every stuff that you already know and just get onto the action bits.
If you read the book Six of Crows, or the Six of Crows duology, and you thought, you know what this needs? Lesbians and not being quite as interesting, then this is the book for you. If you want just more boring Six of Crows, but with lesbians.
And if you read Foundryside and
you wanted something a lot shorter.
Yeah, you want
exactly. Slightly less interesting.
And slightly less interesting. That's exactly what I was about to say word for word. There's this book. Why shouldn't you read it?
It's not very interesting.
It's not very interesting. That's pretty much it.
Like it's extremely generic, and unfortunately, for a heist book, it just does not spend nearly enough time on the heist. And
yes,
like a good heist book should have, an excessively convoluted plan, which somehow manages to all fall together, despite the fact that, unexpected things keep coming up and throwing off this intricate plan. And they don't really have an intricate plan, and they don't do a very good job of dealing with the things that crop up. And it's just like, and it takes it forever to even get there.
Yeah.
It's a perfectly acceptable sort of generic fantasy adventure. The problem is it's not actually a very good heist book.
No, that is the issue. Like, we would have needed, like, the issue that I, had when we were heading off to the target of the heist is that we have a plan, but none of the people, and it's a very clever plan, but none of the people know what the plan is. And the thing with a heist book is that you need to know what the plan is so you can watch it fall apart interestingly and watch them improvise around it. If you don't know what the original plan was supposed to be, which you can't for structural reasons in this book without spoiling a bunch of things, it's poorly conceived as a heist.
Yes.
Even though it very clearly puts together its main characters and gives them all of these internal conflicts and sends them off as if this was going to be that kind of heist book, and yet.
Yeah.
Content warnings, horrible death and blood, and violence.
Sexual harassment.
Sexual harassment, no actual sexual assault on screen. Anything else? Slavery, mind control.
People.
Yeah.
Right. Mind control and enslaving people.
Kidnapping infants from their parents.
But I mean, also a lot of people walking around being mind-controlled zombie types.
Body modification, coercive tattooing and branding, slavery stuff, basically.
Yeah. But it's not really very interested in any of that.
No, it's basically just scene setting.
Yeah.
Set dressing, cool stuff to look at. A lot of tattoos. People are tattooed all over the place in this book. This book really likes tattoos.
The author just is really into tattoos, I guess.
Yep. All right, shall we go off to the spoiler zone?
Let's go into the spoiler zone.
Spoiler zone. RJB Truther Zone. Conspiracy. So, I don't know what we were going to talk about this book, but as I went through this book, I became increasingly convinced that one of two things has happened here. And one of which is that Robert Jackson Bennett should have a quiet word with MJ Kuhn about plagiarism, or that Robert Jackson Bennett is MJ Kuhn. Now, Robert Jackson Bennett is an established author with a lot of books to his name. He's in the middle of the Foundryside trilogy right now, as far as I'm aware. Has a YouTube presence. MJ Kuhn is just a single author photo, as far as I can tell. Which is
she does. I mean, it's a fairly she has a fairly convincing author's note about her life and her husband and her dogs or whatever. So
yeah,
I do not think that this is Robert Jackson Bennett, slumming it in YA or whatever.
Sure. With that being said, my God, does this person like Robert Jackson Bennett's work at Foundryside specifically? Let me go through some of the similarities, right? So our main character is a scarred up little gremlin with specifically extrasensory powers who got them from a facility in which she was imprisoned as a child. Where she was horribly experimented on.
This is not a facility where she was imprisoned as a child. This is her father chained her up in a basement.
Indeed.
On their house. It's just a little different.
It's the same sort of deal though with the flashbacks.
Right. It's a horrible little gremlin who has been subjected to horrible experimentation in a sort of generic European fantasy world. But to be fair to Foundryside is less generic.
Really, actually, I moved away from my theory that this was actually written by the same person by the end of this book. simply because this book is not actually as good as Foundryside, which
Also,
is not
it's a
what I was
lot
expecting
shorter.
to find. Yes, it doesn't have that problem with run-on, but it has a lot in common with Foundryside. Apart from that, not only do we have the we have the cartoonishly morally upright secondary deuteragonist in Evelyn and Batman in Foundryside, whatever his name was.
But which, including from a noble family, but has, but like is kind of estranged from them and works for the palace guard.
Yes.
Or works for like the local fantasy cops, basically.
In both cases, there is excessive use of dialect to an annoying extent, but the action sequences are very clear and very well constructed. You know what's going on at all times,
which honestly is a nice improvement in both of these books. Like I wish that was fantasy.
I wish that was something that more people did, and we definitely gave Foundryside credit for that when we were discussing it. I give this book credit for that as well.
Right.
And perhaps, the thing that really made me think, is this actually just the same author? Is that every character in this book says anyways instead of anyway. And that was the thing that was like, what? For me about Foundryside. Because to me, as a middle-aged person, that's something that you say if you're a small child. And like all of these adults are saying it in both of these books. And I'm like, that's really specific. And I haven't come across it anywhere else. And yet it is in both.
It does exist in multiple places. When you were complaining about this, I Googled it, and Merriam-Webster has an entire page on the many uses of anyways throughout the centuries.
Oh, so. I mean, I know that it's not that, Robert Jackson Bennett did not invent saying anyways. I'm not.
No, what I'm saying is that this is something that there is actually a long literary tradition of people using anyways to sound. My theory is that they're doing it to make the characters sound colloquial and like casual.
But again, it's like every character, no matter what their background is, or says it, and that's this in Bennett and in Foundryside and in this book and in none of the other books that we've done, which is what made me. I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen in other books. Clearly, it should, it must. But
I gotta say, one thing that I want to give Foundryside credit for over Among Thieves is that Foundryside really commits to having Sanchia be this like horrible, filthy, ugly little gremlin. And Among Thieves, maybe it's, for whatever reason, all of its characters are really attractive, including the like assassin experimented on.
Yes, she doesn't actually have any, scars.
She has
tattoos.
She has a scar, but it's a very sort of artistic, pretty one.
Yes,
is the impression because we've got our like 18-year-old boy or whatever who's totally got a thing for her, and who thinks about how pretty she is. So like unlike Sanchia, who bathes once a month until they fix the thing going on in her head.
And whereas both Sanchia and Raya have PTSD and like have PTSD symptoms in this book, Sanchia's are, if not like, maybe the best iteration of that I've ever seen. They are at least interesting and thought through. Whereas
Sanchia's actually reads as, somebody attempting to depict PTSD, whereas Raya just has the occasional flashback.
Yes, which Raya has the kind of PTSD that keeps her from winning fights that she should be winning easily. Raya, and only when it's convenient for the plot. Raya's powers, incidentally, are also incredibly plot derived. Like, I mean,
she mostly just has like, she mostly has like spidey sense and some basic telekinesis, mostly around her, mostly involving her axes, but maybe a little bit for herself as well.
Yeah, but she does or doesn't do that in situations which are not consistent. And and like particularly the scene in the tower where the other person, where the person from the other gang, the Kestrel Crowns, steals the pen out from under them, where Raya could very easily, based on what we've seen, have summoned her axe and use it to split that person open.
Right.
But then there wouldn't have been a plot. And also the way that she fails to get the pen at all during that entire sequence is extremely contrived.
Right.
But the book would have been over if she had succeeded.
Everything with the pen is extremely contrived.
Yeah, the pen has. I don't even want to begin to get actually my favorite thing in the entire book is the bit where Tristan does the flying leap at the pen and manages to slice himself strategically on a sword on the way over to the pen. So he can put his thumb on.
Put his bloody thumbprint.
Right.
I don't know. I'm very fond of the moment, like 3 pages later, where the pen, where he gets his one shot at using the powers, and the pen is like, no, you're not worth it.
Yes. No, that is that pen is a plot device for sure. Actually, my favorite line in the book actually happens during that sequence. Speaking of that sequence, because when he gets the power, the book says his head exploded, and out loud while I was listening to the audiobook, I said, "Literally, I hope." And the audiobook then immediately said, "Only metaphorically," and I was like, "Oh." So that was a nice little piece of dialogue I got to have with the text in real time.
Yeah.
But the other thing that this has in common with a Foundryside is that it really, really wants you to know that it's the first book in a series. It is not perhaps actually it might be slightly better than Foundryside was, because again, Foundryside was too long, and it took way too long getting to what should have just been the setup for the setting in the first place. And this one actually manages to conclude its bit of the plot. But I
don't know. I feel like it really doesn't. I mean, they go on this entire heist thing, and then the pen's not actually destroyed, and yes. And the characters have reconfigured their loyalties, but presumably that won't stay the case in the next book. But it will probably eventually reform along those lines in the end, because it's drawn along romantic interest. I felt like this was half a book.
Well, I'm glad it wasn't a full book, because then it would have been 20 hours long. And I
know. Well, I felt like it was, half a book padded out to be a book's length.
I see.
But it was only like half a book's worth of plot.
You could have easily cut out pretty much the entire voyage to the Guildmaster's Island.
Why do they have to take a detour? Why do they have to have left their stuff behind and have to take a detour to this other city? There's absolutely no plot reason to have done that.
Yeah, and
they spent way too much time setting up why we're going to go on this heist.
Which we already knew.
It felt like a Dungeons and Dragons game where the party, everybody's insisting on that they have to be in character, and so instead of just going, yes, obviously we're going to raid the Wizard's Tower, everybody insists on being talked around in character into raiding the Wizard's Tower.
Yes.
It felt like that sort of kind of meandering waste of time.
Now that you mention it, that is so correct. The fact that all of the party members had a tragic backstory, all of them, except I can see the person who was playing Nash being I want to roleplay a cool tall lady. Can we just do that? But everybody else has to have this super convoluted backstory that doesn't actually impact on the plot of this book at all, apart from giving them some motivations, which actually don't impact on what happens at all, because mostly they're not allowed to act on any of those motivations. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this could be an adaptation of a particularly underwhelming D&D session. I'd like to apologize for how rude we're being, but I won't. That's
right, and I think that's... And, for all, it's not that I was super, super kind, either of us were super, super kind to Foundryside, but, Foundryside is, it is interesting. Its characters have... even when they're sort of generic, they've got character moments. They have motivations that have some amount of emotional weight to them. But for example, Nash. Why is she doing any of this? We don't really know. We don't really care. She just she's got a gambling thing, but it doesn't really seem to rise to the level of being a gambling addiction. She just likes to gamble, and so she's also a smuggler.
Also, we don't know what her deal with Colin Clem is, and that's never revealed at all, which is weird.
Well, it's revealed that as far as I can tell, he and she have both decided that it is easier to give everybody the impression that they're sleeping together. In his case, presumably for some sort of form of misdirection, and in her case, so that she, because nobody's going to sexually harass the woman who's sleeping with like the mafia don.
Sure.
And but this is very quickly clarified, because it's very important to her that Ivan understands that she's not actually sleeping with him. Because that could have caused some tension if like
right.
if either she were sleeping with him and maybe she doesn't want to, and maybe she wants to break up, but how do you break up with the gang boss? Or maybe she's not sure she wants to break up, but now she's super attracted to this hot guy. Or maybe she just doesn't want to immediately throw off this rumor that she and the gang boss have been cultivating for however long. But no, she's perfectly happy to be like, this guy's hot. I will let him know. I am not actually. And also, like, their teamwork she decides who's she going to throw her lot in with. This guy. Why? Because he's hot.
Yeah, and this is incidentally another one of those Wizards versus Lesbian books where the heterosexual romance has more like depth and description of feelings and attraction, and like
I'm not sure I'd call it depth.
When I say more, I mean more than zero.
This guy is hot. Yes, as opposed to I don't know. I actually feel like Raya and Evelyn's thing that is presumably going to develop into an actual romance in the next book is mildly more interesting.
It is, but it's like their physical attraction is not described
at all. That's a really good point. This is a book where the physical attraction, but that the only physical attraction that's actually described really is Claudia Nash's for Ivan. Like, we don't get a sense of whether or not a strong sense of whether or not Ivan's attracted to her. And, like, Tristan is sort of mooning over Raya a bunch, but we don't even get, like, that much of a sense of attraction to her. The only person who seems to, like, feel any signs of actual attraction is the straight woman to the, like, gorgeous, like...
Russian.
Yeah, exactly. Like, generically... Northeastern European. Just combine all the stereotypes into one. Like, he speaks fake German, but his name is Ivan and his brother's name is Casimir. And they're rebelling against, basically the Tsar.
The Tsar. Or the Kaiser, but the Tsar,
but he says, like, Mein Gott a lot or whatever.
He does, which is terribly annoying. I think that, speaking of sexy, incidentally, this isn't... And speaking of sexy and speaking of mafia bosses, this book does the fun thing where it makes the homicidal organized crime leader very, very sexy and attractive and powerful. And
is he sexy and attractive
essentially
and powerful?
Infallible? Well, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of time is spent on his immaculate suits and his confidence and his crazy eyes and the everything sort of. I think that he would be a Tumblr guy if this book had more traction. What do Bill Cipher, the Onceler, and Jack from the Jack in the Box commercials have in common? They all wear a tie. They wear a tie. Go to Tumblr sexymen.fandom.com to find out more.
Okay, that's fair. That is, but the thing is, honestly, like, so a big part of my problem with this book is that the ways in which it is not like Foundryside are the ways in which it is like Six of Crows, and Six of Crows just does that better. Like, it has its, morally gray, Tumblr sexy man, crazy-eyed, wears immaculate suits guy, but, like, he's much more interesting. I'm not going to call him really interesting, but he's much more interesting than Callum Clem.
I looked at the author at the website for the author because I was looking for evidence that MJ Kuhn doesn't exist, and I was and the fact that this one of the marketing points for this book was morally gray made me laugh a lot.
Which is funny because like it's not really morally gray. It's just
No,
it's a bunch
not.
of people who aren't. It's like
it's a bunch of people who
aren't very good
who have done
people.
bad things but really want to do good fundamentally,
Right.
and are very nice and relatable people except for the murdering, you know.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, because I feel like morally gray implies that, you know, you have to ask questions like, what is the morally correct thing to do? Or, you know, do I want this person to succeed even though success for them means doing things that are against my personal moral code or against their personal moral code? But, like, none of these characters have any moral weight whatsoever. Like, Raya cuts off... I mean, some of my favorite scenes actually in this book are near the beginning where, like, Raya cuts off a guy's finger and it's just, like, walking down the street, whistling, flipping the finger from hand to hand, you know?
Yeah, if that had been our pro tag for the whole book, we would have had a more fun time, I think.
It would have been, like, the fact that, you know, she, like, pops up behind Tristan, who, you know, again, has this giant crush and, like, runs a finger down his cheek, but it's the severed finger that she cut off of, like, a prince to, you know, intimidate him for screwing over the crime lord. Like, that is interesting, and it's morally gray and at least, like, a sort of dark comedic thing. But that, all of that just immediately drops, like, 30 pages in.
Yeah.
At which point, nobody does any, you know... Like, people talk a lot about how, oh, you know, we're so bad or whatever, but, like, nobody ever makes any hard choices. The plot makes all the choices for them, and it, like, seems to ever skate away from making them make the hard choices. Like, do I save my brother, the revolutionary who's rotting in the Tsar's prison, or do I sell out these people who've come to rely on me? It never comes up, actually.
Yeah. No, nobody ever actually has to make as I think I said this before, nobody ever actually has to make the big choice because the plot conveniently makes it so that that's not, they don't actually have a choice. They just do the next thing.
And also, like, part of my problem also is that the choices, because each of them, the hook to this book is that, you know, it's a heist crew, and each of them has the secret reason why they are going to backstab all the others. But part of the problem with there being any real moral weight to this decision to backstab is that none of these people like each other enough to convince me that it would be that hard for them to backstab people. Like, I feel like Ivan would feel bad about it because, you know,
He feels bad about a lot of things.
He feels bad about a lot of things, we're told. But, like, Raya would just backstab everybody because that's how she's, you know, stayed alive for the past 20 years or whatever. Evelyn would cheerfully backstab everybody because she looks down on them all because they're criminals. Mm-hmm. Nash actually doesn't have really any, like, goals as far as I can tell. So she would be shocked. She'd be, like, mildly shocked, but she would also be like, well, what did I expect? I'm with a bunch of gangsters. Tristan, similarly, you know, Tristan would feel really bad about backstabbing Raya because he has a crush on her. But, you know... And he is the only one who actually does backstab everybody. And, you know, he feels bad about it. But, like,
Yep.
it's pretty much only Raya. And once again, there's no real weight to that because he makes his decision completely off camera because despite the fact that it's really super obvious that he's the missing prince, the author wants us really doesn't want us to know he's the missing prince.
For some reason, yeah. No, it's
For
like,
some reason.
don't withhold information that makes it harder for you to write the book, particularly when
Right.
it's obvious.
Right.
For Christ's sake.
It's like you keep talking about this missing prince.
Yeah. I would say that yeah, no, that's sort of the major issue with the book is that, you know, it sets up all these moral ambiguities, but even in the case where Tristan, you know, betrays them, it's like he would have been killed otherwise, you know.
Right.
And it's like that's
So it's
not really
like
a choice,
that hard,
is it?
Right.
You know, like you don't, you know, is it you're gonna find the guts to sacrifice your life for these people who have essentially turned you into an indentured servant for the last few years? Probably not, even if you like one of them.
Right. And I think part of it's that, you know, these people don't really care enough about each other to make that.
Oh, well, it says that while they were on the boat, they became kind of a family. Like, there's literally just a sentence that says that.
They
Yeah,
don't
I
act
know.
like that.
Show don't tell, you guys.
I mean, which is
particularly
funny.
since it spends so much time on the boat not showing it.
I'm actually a big fan of just telling, but you can't tell if you're showing the opposite for page upon page.
Solid point.
Oh, but I think the other half of like why there's no real emotional weight to the question of who's going to backstab and will they actually backstab is that so part of the thing that makes betrayal hurt is that you're not supposed to see it coming, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you know, if you know that your terrible boyfriend is cheating on you and then you find out he's cheating on you, that's you know, I'm sure that you'll be upset about it, but like that's not going to be upsetting in the same way as like, you know, I thought I had the perfect life and then suddenly it turns out, you know, my partner's been having an affair for 5 years or whatever. Like it's the shock that you had this trust and it was broken. But none of these people trust each other anyway. Like if Raya backstabbed everybody, no, who's going to be shocked?
Yeah, no.
If Ivan backstabs everybody, nobody. Oh, Ivan will be the only one who's like vaguely surprised at himself. Maybe.
Is the surprise supposed to be that there is honor among thieves? Question mark. But there isn't actually. It turns out.
Right, but the thing is that because we don't, you know.
The only thing that actually makes these people, you know, the only connections in this book that actually last are ones that are based on physical attraction.
Right. Except kind of Raya's affection for Tristan, which appears to be sort of, you know, he's so poor and pathetic.
Yes.
But I just, you know, the thing is, they needed to show some examples of these people saving each other. These people genuinely risking their lives to, you know, save the other one. You have to, or revealing something about their pasts, maybe. Because they don't do any of the things you need to do to build trust and closeness, there's nothing to lose other than a sentence about them becoming almost like a family.
Yep. I'm 100% with you. So, like, this was a listener suggestion, right?
Sorry, listener.
I do apologize, listener. I think this probably snuck over our threshold of interestingness for that reason, and also because of the sort of blatant Foundryside resonances. Mm-hmm. But I think as a general matter, we'd probably steer away from a book like this just because there isn't actually that much meat on those bones. I mean, fun to complain, of course, but
we really prefer to with the exception of linguist mages,
yeah,
we prefer
I would take a disaster over this. Yeah. A disaster. Complaining about a book that is like really leaning into its disastrousness is fun.
Right.
There are I would say a thing that set this author's voice apart was a knack for disgusting similes. Particularly again near the beginning of the book, and this actually resonated with me when you said how, you know, Raya's like shocking vulgarity is kind of dropped. Which is sort of, it's kind of meant to be character development, but actually it seems to just be sanding off the only thing that made her interesting. And with that, unfortunately, also the disgusting similes disappear, which is unfortunate because they were like one of the things that I enjoyed. There was a lot of that, but my favorite simile in the book actually is deaf as turtles. Which Raya says later on, assuming that, and she assumes that turtles are deaf because they don't have ears, which is very charming. I would have, and like actually a character moment where she's kind of vulnerable without, you know, just sort of being anodyne. I would have liked more of that, you know, more of an actual personality to emerge from Raya as she becomes more comfortable with the people around her.
Right, because part of the thing is when she shows bits of personality, you know, she is a charming, interesting character. Like her weird vulgarity and her complete, the complete sort of blasé-ness that she has towards violence at this point, combined with the fact that she's still she's not like hardened and cold all the time. She's sort of cheerful and she's desensitized so that she can find all this stuff funny, and that was like, for a while she was definitely the most interesting character, just because she was, that's not actually something that, for one thing, female characters often get to be.
True.
And also it made her at least a little bit unusual, and it made her entertaining.
I like the thing that she does, which is, sort of a lesbian main character superpower, which is flirting with other women in a way that is calculated to make them uncomfortable. That is like a thing that is possible with other gender and attraction dynamics, but has more baggage in pretty much every other configuration.
I have to say, it actually has a lot of baggage with the lesbian thing as well. It's just it is not something that, perhaps the sort of predatory, creepy lesbian thing is perhaps not a stereotype that you've had to engage with much, but it definitely is one.
I hold my hands up and walk back into the ocean. Oh, I left this in because we're short on time, but once again, Isaac, please shut up.
I'm honestly glad that we're allowed now to have vulgar, messy lesbians who can hit on women to make them uncomfortable, because, like, everybody else gets to, hit on each other to make them uncomfortable, to make people uncomfortable. Why not? And like with Raya, it's clearly sort of to cover up any chance of vulnerability. So, yeah. Again, it works well for the character, but I would not say that it has less baggage.
I retract the assessment. Incidentally, I should mention that the reason that I know it's definitely Raya is because the audiobook, and I feel so bad for both the narrator of the audiobook and for the poor sap who had to edit and produce it. Every instance of her name is cut and pasted in with like, they're not careful edits, and of course, why would you make a careful edit? It's 10 hours and you're having to slot in the correct pronunciation for everyone. But clearly on the first pass, the narrator said something that wasn't Raya, and that had to be pasted over for every instance of it. And the same thing
and they did not have the budget to re-record from the beginning.
Right, and same thing for Timur, incidentally. So every time the nation of Timur is mentioned, that's also a cut and paste. So
I feel like at that point, if I were the author, I would have been like, you know what, just let it be mispronounced.
That was one of the things that made me think that it was like, made me think that it was Bennett rather than a new author, because I was like, who would have the clout to even ask, or the nerve to even ask for this in the audiobook for your first book? But who knows, Yeah,
maybe it wasn't maybe it was not the author's call.
Could very well be not the author's call, but regardless, it is Raya. And
see, now I almost wish that I pronounced it Rhea the entire time, and you could have just gone and like pasted Raya over it every time, really obviously, in this podcast.
Oh yeah, no, I would be more than happy to spend the hours that would have taken, along with the jingles and the rest of the editing.
Yes. Maybe you can just do it in like the first mention of her name as a joke.
Okay, all right. But also, here's a fun fact that Raya is 1960s British gay slang for hair. They did. It is. They did a lot of 1960s British gay slang had a lot of backwards talking. So Raya is hair spelled backwards. And so they would do that. So I remember distinctly a sketch, which I may or may not copy and paste part of into here to pad this episode out for time.
We are kind of having to work to pad this one out a bit.
In which Julian and Sandy, the camp characters in this sketch show, are recalling the story of Samson, and they're like, "Oh, Nanti Raya." Nanti meaning no, Raya meaning
Ah.
hair. The slang I was referring to was Polari, and it was more in use in the 19th century. In fact, the sketch show excerpt of which I'm about to play kinda killed it by making it mainstream.
In the chair, Julian will take you. He tortures the Ryan. Lovely. He's got the fingers for it.
Oh. Hands of an artiste.
Oh, good. When he's done that, would you ask him to do my hair?
He's very bold.
Yes.
Yes. Now, do we have anything else? Literally anything else?
No, well, okay. So we spent a lot of time complaining about this book, and we've sort of scraped the bottom of the barrel to find some nice things to say about it. And like seriously, we're making it sound pretty bad, but the thing is that it's just kind of bland. But at the same time, if you read quickly and you just need to fill 3 to 5 hours of your time, you could do worse.
I think the first thing that I said about it to you is, actually, don't mind this. And that was when I was getting into the first big sort of clusterfuck action bit before they ship off.
Right, so that's the most interesting part of the book.
Yes, and beyond that point, it became a bit of a slog. But
right.
It's like I think that with some tightening, I think the author has like a good command of action and a good command of and a good command of chaos. Mm-hmm. Like set pieces with a lot of things firing off at the same time. You get like the whole denouement in the pit or whatever it's called, the fight club.
That was a pretty good scene.
Yeah, and there was a lot of moving parts, and you had to keep track of where a bunch of different people were, and the narrative like switch between voices and also switch, or not voices, but point of view characters,
viewpoints.
And then skip back in time a few places to go to recover the same territory from different angles. All good, I think. That's the strength here. It's just the overall plotting and the overall pacing is where it falls down. But like within those sequences of frenetic action, I think this author has a grip on it that is better than a lot of the people who are concerned with the ideas perhaps more than making their climactic battles, which they have to have for thematic reasons, interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And yeah, no, because the action, other than the first chapter or two, which is I think much more sort of charming and fun than the rest, the action scenes are really where the shines, including the moment. Another good thing is when they're setting off the flares and Raya pulls Evelyn to jump off the cliff into the ocean, and that was a pretty good sort of, the heist has gone wrong, you have to escape in some dramatically stupid way. So yeah, I mean, also you can read this just to get a good sense of what a sort of well-written, very clear, coherent action scene looks like. Well, we can talk a little bit more about the queerness in this book, because one of the things I think is interesting is we're very clear on Raya's preferences, and we're very clear on Tristan's preferences, and we're very clear on Nash's preferences. And the object, with the exception of poor Tristan, the objects of Raya and Nash's desires are despite the fact that we get inside their heads and their viewpoint characters are kind of blank slates. We don't get you don't get a strong sense of, does Evelyn feel any real reciprocal attraction to Raya, or is she just starting to see this person as a human being?
I believe that the language is that
Nash.
Evelyn feels she feels a named emotion for Raya, which is pity. And the book then says pity, a mixture of pity and something else? Question mark. Which, it's fair enough. This is an incredibly straight-laced person who grew up in a very strict environment and then grew up in a basically
became a
went
cop,
through army
basically.
training or cop training and had to hang out with a bunch of disgusting men. And so probably has not even considered sexual attraction as a thing that might apply to her up until this point. And so,
True, but
you know,
but is pity really where that's going to come from?
well, according to Homestuck, I will edit
And
that out.
there was no reason
there was no
to
need for
bring
me to do that at all.
Homestuck into there, and now you brought Homestuck into it, and we have to reset the Homestuck counter. And unlike last episode, there's no good reason for that one.
I mean, if I don't edit that out, we just added a couple more minutes of runtime to this episode. So
Our poor listeners, just like listening to us flail around trying to find something more to say. You can just write some extra jingles.
Can I? Thank you. Here are some extra jingles off the top of my head, just to make this episode hit the hour mark. How many seconds? I'm gonna leave that mistake in. How many seconds can I waste before you give up and do something else? Something else? Why don't you do something else rather than listen to this? Hey! Extra jingles!
But I mean, the thing is that, you know, part of the point of this, sorry, the Homestuck thing completely threw me off. Part of the, part of the thing that we look at in this podcast is sort of the role that queerness plays in these narratives.
Yes.
And it doesn't really, like, you know, it feels like Raya is a lesbian because, like, this, I honestly feel like this book could work just as well if you gender flipped Raya. It feels like Raya's lesbian because that's the zeitgeist.
Yeah, when I was, like, you know, thinking paranoid thoughts about Mr. Bennett, Mr. Darcy, I was thinking, well, okay, so, you know, why have you gender swapped yourself to release this book? And one of the things that we complained about Foundryside, I mean, complain may be a strong word, but we thought, wouldn't it have been better if the cop had been a woman? And so there could have been like a, you know, that sexual tension there. Might that have been more interesting? Maybe I was the only one who said that, but it's like, he's the most interesting character. I wish that he had been the lesbian or a lesbian.
I mean, I'm never going to say no to, like, adding more lesbians to the story.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. And so I was like, okay, is this his experiment with, like, will I get more traction if I, you know, add more to the lesbian pile and also make this a book from a woman? And I was like,
this is such a convoluted conspiracy theory for something that is so obviously wrong.
I know. I knew it was wrong when I had the idea. I was just enjoying myself.
No, I understand. I just, like, I feel like you're slandering poor Robert Jackson Bennett here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett. You're the victim in this, okay? 100%. But I thought perhaps that was part of the sort of experiment here, and which is why the gay character feels like, okay, this character is a gay woman because that's what we do now, and it makes the book easier to sell. I mean, and if that is in fact true, like, that's kind of astounding, isn't it? You know,
No,
I mean,
it definitely is.
We've talked around this, like, for a few episodes, but, like, the fact that we seem to be in a place where you can add gay representation, well, specifically lesbian representation to your book to make it more saleable. Like, who would have thought it? Like, even 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and it's, you know, it's really interesting because I feel like stories involving gay men have never really quite had, like, their moment in the sun the way that lesbian science fiction is having right now.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they've been easier to find. Like, my entire life, it's been way easier to find fantasy, spec fic, mostly fantasy, mostly written by women about, you know, pretty gay men and their, like, sad, tragic stories, and they're pretty hair.
Yes, but where is the Bara SFF, might I ask? Well, we've given up talking about Among Thieves completely, so let's talk about Bara as opposed to Yowie. Bara is usually written by men, and it features adults in adult lives rather than Yowie with the girly men in high school. This is a drastic oversimplification. Where's the gay science fiction written by gay men?
I think there's I've been told that there's a lot of gay shifter erotica out there, like wolf shifter or cat shifter or whatever, and presumably
there's a lot of everything wolf shifter or cat shifter erotica out there.
But what I'm saying is, I think that if you want, gay spec fic written by gay men, a lot of it is just erotica.
I think that's reductive. Frankly, I think that there would be more of it if if we were to have a cultural moment where it could be marketable. And I think that,
Well, but the thing is okay, so we've had, the other gay spec fic written by a gay man is TJ Klune's stuff, which is like the most sort of sunshine and roses, happy, sweet.
TJ Klune, not to be confused with MJ Kuhn.
Right.
Yes.
Who wrote Cerulean Sea and something door. And like, his stuff, if you could gender swap it and it wouldn't be wizards versus lesbians because there's no wizards.
Right. We are just having fun in the sun.
Well, no, it's like, we're having, we are finding our family through, a lot of like significant looks and adopting a bunch of orphans together or whatever. And so there's Kirith Kieran, if you want fantasy by a gay man about a gay man. And that one, weirdly, I got to read it before, like, when it was still just, when it had, like, not gone to press yet, because the author was a friend of one of my high school teachers. So that came out in, like, the 90s, because I'm old. So, and I think that there's probably others. It's just, it's taking me a while just to reach back to the stuff that I was reading in, the 90s. But I think that, I feel like part of why lesbian science, like spec fic, is having its moment in the sun right now is that there was just less of it for so long. And, for a long time, and this is still kind of the case, but probably less and less, for a long time, most of the fan fiction was gay. There was way more yaoi manga than yuri manga, and certainly way more yaoi manga than yuri manga getting translated. Same for the anime. There was more gay male spec fic being published than gay female spec fic. Citation needed. And so it feels like you have an entire generation of people who've just been like, suddenly somebody realized there's a market for it and the floodgates are opening, because there was never any sort of trickle in the past. Sure.
Yeah, okay, I can accept that.
I'm not saying we shouldn't have more, that we should not have more gay male spec fic. I would happily read witches versus gay boys. No, I don't know, that could get kind of misogynist, but like, yeah, wizards. I would happily read wizards versus gay boys.
I was thinking that now that my dreams of writing a wizards versus lesbians parody have been crushed, maybe it's time for me to step into the market with wizards versus
gay men. We could read. Yeah. It'd have to be a bonus episode, but I think we should do Iron Widow as a bonus episode, because that's a bi girl and her two boyfriends who are also each other's boyfriend. So it's like happy poly triad, but that's got some male romance going on
with wizards.
Oh yeah, there's definitely wizards. Also,
yeah.
No. Iron Widow. Sorry to hijack this our podcast, but this is like the most book. It is. You have to understand. It is about mecha pilots using chi, but all the mecha pilots are Chinese emperors. In animal mecha, the main character is Empress Wu Zetian as like a teenage girl, you know, killing a fellow mecha pilot with the power of her chi, and then like getting into this, you know, poly triad. We should read it. But there's wizards. There's definitely wizards.
We're definitely
Liang is a wizard.
We're having an episode about this. I mean,
cool,
I can't. There's no way to stop it. I assume Lee has read this book.
No, I'm trying to convince Lee.
That's really weird that Lee hasn't read this book. This book is like, anyway, we are okay.
Sorry. Anyway, sorry.
This book is not great, but you might like it. I don't know.
And
I'm
again,
so sorry to the reader who
recommended the person who
it.
recommended this book. I can see why you enjoyed it. I assume you enjoyed it. I assume that's why you recommended it. I can see why people have enjoyed this book. It just, you know, did not push our buttons in the ways that that you probably have learned from listening to far too many episodes of this podcast.
Indeed. But the books that we're going to do next week surely will, which is Catfishing on Catnet.
Oh, I love that one. That one's just extremely charming.
Tell me this is furries. Is it furries?
No, it's I'm sorry. No, did you never read the More Cat Pictures Please or whatever it is? Like that was an award-winning short story about an AI who's just like is really into cats?
No, but this is a familiar concept.
Anyway, the short story got spun out into a novel, and where the short story was like, everything is happy because, you know, an AI is solving everybody's problems because it loves cats. This one is more like, maybe actually not everything on the internet is happy.
Well, I look forward to it. That sounds, if nothing else, like an interesting time.
It's definitely a bit of a change of pace.
Yes, and that will be the subject of our next episode. Until then, if you care to stick your hand in the Gamja bar of recommending a book to us,
please do. I guess you can recommend a book to us and say, and you know, and if it will make you sad to hear us say mean things about it, then I guess you could recommend a book to us and then say, but don't cover it if you're going to be mean, in which case I'll read it and decide whether or not we should put it on the list.
Yes, if Alexis is going to be mean about it, I will certainly be mean about it. So that's a pretty good system. With
one exception, which is The Light from Uncommon Stars. Then now we've found a middle ground on The Light from Uncommon Stars.
We've reached parity on that one, or at least something similar
thanks
to
the linguist mages.
Yes, I have a friend of mine on Discord read that on my recommendation, and it was like, this is terrible. I'm going to write a lot of fan fiction about it now.
Oh, Light from Uncommon Stars?
Yeah, which I think is the correct response.
Oh, yes, definitely. Anyway, please do recommend books to us, guys. I'm always looking for more reading material.
Indeed. And
all right. Thanks, everyone. Sorry.
Bye-bye.